Hello and welcome to another Postdoc vlog. I am Iris and I am a postdoc at the German Aerospace Center, which I think still sounds incredibly cool. Let's discuss what happened in September, shall we? So I always have a little to-do list at the beginning of the month, and then at the end of the month I present you my ta-da list. And the main thing that I am quite proud of is that we submitted the revisions of the Geodynamics 101 paper. So back in February, we submitted a paper, a review paper that was supposed to be educational, kind of easing people into geodynamics, and it was a 92-page manuscript detailing anything and everything to do with numerical modeling, just to teach people the basics really, and for some reason I'm the first author. And then we got reviews from 3 people, 3 reviews, so it's a lot, but they were from 3 really big names in geodynamics, so that was really cool. 3 big professors, all men, by the way. Just saying. Yeah, we had to address those reviews. So we did. In general, they all quite liked it. So that was really nice. But they, wanted us to add some nuance, add some things in that we had forgotten. So we spent a lot of time working on those reviews, addressing all the comments, rewriting a few sections completely. So we had a lot of Zoom meetings. I really love this collaboration. Everyone is very much equal. We all do it together and we all write different sections, and I don't know, I've never really written a paper like that before, and it is amazing, and I want to do this for all my projects. We have a rebuttal letter where we address all the comments of like 60 pages, and although one of the comments was that it was quite long, we went from a 92-page manuscript to a 100-page manuscript. And then it was pointed out to me that we called the paper 101 Geodynamic Modeling, so if we get another round of revisions, the goal would be to get 101 pages. We'll see if that happens. It's back into review now. I think the same reviewers are looking at it, so hopefully they like our changes and hopefully we'll hear from them soon. So yeah, that was a big thing. That was something I did at the beginning of this month. And then another big thing is that I have been working on my Venus project, and one of the major breakthroughs there is that I kind of figured out what I'm meant to be doing, what the project really entails. So I haven't properly started the project yet in so many words, but at least I know now where I need to go, which is much better than a month ago when I was just reading about things and I was like, oh, interesting, but how? And now I kind of see a how. The actual doing it is the next step, but I'm working on that. I thought I'd tell you what the project is that I'm meant to be working on. So it's about the interior atmosphere coupling on Venus. And that sounds great, but I also didn't really know what that meant. So let's dissect those words. So Venus, first, we all know Venus, second planet from the sun, about the same size and mass as Earth, but much more hellish, very hot at the surface, large pressures, not your typical holiday destination. So Venus, interesting planet, we don't know much about it. In recent years, the focus has been mainly on Mars in terms of planets other than the Earth, because obviously we know the most about Earth. And Venus has been kind of forgotten, was studied quite a lot in the 70s when there was this space race competition between the US and the Soviet Union. The Americans claimed the moon, great. But the Soviets went to Venus and actually had the first and only, so far, landers on Venus, and they did some rock samples, and many people historically consider it as the Russian planet because they were really the pioneers in discovering Venus. But then, with the breakup of the Soviet Union, political stuff, obviously their space agency wasn't at the forefront of their minds at what they were focusing on. So their Venus program kind of died out. This is my very basic summary of me reading stuff, so take it with a pinch of salt. There's a lot of nuance that I'm not mentioning, obviously. And now recently there has been this new impulse in Venus research with NASA announcing 2 missions to Venus and ESA, the European Space Agency, announcing 1 mission to Venus and Vision. I'm not sure why I've been telling that. Oh yes, I wanted to define Venus. So that is Venus, unexplored largely. So yeah, Venus, mystery, always covered in clouds. That is the planet that I am researching. Now, interior interior-atmosphere coupling. What does that mean? When we talk about the interior of Venus, we basically mean the solid body of Venus. So that means the core, mantle, and crust, like the rocks of Venus. And that obviously has an evolution. On Earth, we have plate tectonics, and that has all kinds of implications for how the planet cools. On Venus, with the limited data that we have, there are no indications of plate tectonics, but there is also no indication that it's completely boring and stationary like Mars and the moon. There are some really interesting indications that some things might still be happening on Venus. In general, the surface of Venus is relatively young, geologically speaking, generally thought to be about 500 million years, that people have discovered from counting the amount of craters that you can see. Because on Earth, for example, you don't see that many crater impacts because of this plate tectonics, where you continuously recycle the crust. So if there is a meteorite impact after 500 million years, those plates on which you had those impacts will have been lost to the mantle, so you can't observe them anymore. So there is not that many crater impacts on Earth. Whereas on the moon, for example, you see many crater impacts, because on the moon there is no recycling of the surface. So it has a very, very old surface, and you see many craters. Venus, intermediate case. There are a few craters, less than 1,000 I believe, and that is not as much as you would expect if it had been very old. So it's about 500 million years old, the surface, on average. So that is where the interesting part of Venus comes in terms of its interior, because why does it have such a young surface? What does that mean for the evolution of the mantle, and how does the planet cool? So now we have defined Venus and the interior, and now we need the atmosphere. It has a very big atmosphere, much bigger than the Earth's, and that is interesting because we don't know really how that works. Does that interact with the surface? There's a lot of complicated things going on in the clouds, many different chemical species and stuff, but the important thing is the greenhouse effect. The atmosphere of Venus is mostly carbon dioxide, I think like 96%, a ridiculous amount. There is some water, probably, maybe, or at least in the past there probably was some water in the atmosphere of Venus. Water and carbon dioxide are both greenhouse gases, which we are all familiar with on the Earth by now. It basically means if there is more of that gas inside the atmosphere, it kind of blankets the planet and allows it to heat up, like it traps heat. Great. So if it traps heat and it warms up the planet with like a little blanket of carbon dioxide and water, then the surface temperature rises, right? This is what we see now on Earth. Science in practice. And then you think, okay, great, whatever. But the interior of Venus, in how it loses its heat and how the mantle works, how the crust works, is determined in a large part by the surface temperature. So, what I mean by interior atmosphere coupling in my specific case, if you have the interior that does things, maybe there's volcanoes and stuff, then greenhouse gases are output, water and carbon dioxide, which changes the atmospheric composition, which changes the surface temperature of Venus, which has an effect on what happens inside of the planet, which then has an effect on how much volcanoes, for example, you have. And then you can have this loop. There is a geodynamic code called Gaia, which does the interior evolution of planets like Venus. The goal that I have is initially add a relatively simple atmospheric model where you have a constant feedback loop so that you can assess the effect of changing surface temperature according to carbon dioxide and water vapor content of the atmosphere. So that is the interior atmosphere coupling of Venus. That is my project. So yeah, I am still very excited about Venus. I've also done a few other things besides work. I'm still not entirely sure if this YouTube thing can be considered work or outreach, or difficult. I hope that you saw that I started Science Sisters, which is a kind of guilt-free procrastination / entertaining seminar kind of thing. I mean, it's just me talking to friends, really, but about sciencey things. So I think it's relevant. I think it's fun. And there will be Venus content on there as well. I'm very excited for it. Yes. In terms of things that I did, I went to Bradford. There was a musical on that I wanted to see, Hairspray. I know I've seen it in London, but I thought, maybe the tour version is different, and it was. So that was really nice. Bradford is a nice city. I didn't see much of it, but it was nice to go out. In general, I tried to go out more. This is very unlike me. I tried working in a cafe and at the student union. I met some colleagues again. I saw a lot of the PhDs, a lot of, only the PhDs really. The postdocs have all left, like me. And then, on my mission to socially integrate at DLR, we had a social night thing, kind of. We just talked about hobbies and we tried to get to know each other. What did you do on the weekend? Because there's not really any moment in place for that. And I thought it would be good to introduce that, so we did that. But then quickly, it kind of diverted to women's rights, which was amazing. I think also because there were 5 women and there was 1 guy. So we were very much in the majority, which is not something very common in geophysics. Geosciences is one of the worst gender equality sciences there is. I feel very lucky whenever I find myself in the situation of having lots of women around, and that is somehow why we got to women's rights. And they were talking about this book, Invisible Women, about exposing the gender data gap, which basically kind of highlights how the entire society was shaped by men. I mean, we knew this, but therefore also for men. Not on purpose, but just because men don't necessarily realize what women need. People were talking about that. There were several colleagues of mine that had read it and they highly recommended it, so I got really excited. I bought the book. I immediately started reading it and it took me like 1.5 days to finish. Oops. It is fascinating and it's such a good book because it just provides you with all the data and all the data gaps, and then if anyone is skeptical, men, about any of the problems we as women might encounter, you can literally just say, well, look, I've got the data here. To give you an example, medicine, for instance, are usually tested only on men because the hormone cycle of women is too complicated and annoying and could change the outcomes. No shit, Sherlock. That's why you should test it on women, because they have hormone cycles. It's not like you turn them off when you then get medicine. So that is why, a lot of these medicines are actually not properly tested on women, or they have different reactions to it. There's just a lot of unknowns, really, which is exactly the purpose of the book, like exposing that data gap. Yeah, it's fascinating. I highly recommend it. And then when we were talking today, I'm not filming this on a Sunday, obviously, even though that is my upload day. Subscribe for weekly videos. That was so smooth. And then when we were talking today about how the social went, several other of the women that were there also said, oh, I also bought this book, I'm going to read it. It's very exciting. I think the social was really useful and successful. And I think now, apart from like the social thing, we are having another one next week, I think we will also at some point have a seminar kind of thing, maybe, or discussion about this book, Invisible Women, and about gender equality and diversity. And I'm quite excited for that. And with that, I am going to sign off. Next month is going to be an exciting month if all goes well, and I will take you on the journey with me. It's going to be great, but for now, I will see you next month. Bye! Should be working on that, but I'm filming this video, so you win some, you lose some. To give you an example, for example, I think someone is mowing the grass outside and it annoys me. Sorry if you can hear that. I was in the midst of my Venus epic story.